Looking out a dirty old window, down below the cars in the city go rushing by. I sit here alone and I wonder why. Friday night and everyone's moving. I can feel the heat, but it's
Library. We'll get an update from her. And then Kate Murphy, who's the Director of Child Protection Policy at Texans Care for Children out of Austin, should be good. And are you going to be ready for Hip Speak as well?
I'll see what I can do. I mean, I'm a millennial, but I'm in that little bit older group of millennials, so we'll see. We'll see.
And you'll do well. Do well. I mean, a lot of it is sort of like you could sort of guess, but I sort of guess and I get it half right. So that's what happens with me.
Yeah, I'm sort of in that place where I hear it from my students and I should be able to know, but who knows? We'll see. It'll be hit or miss.
And then the date of the day is, what is it today? What's the number?
It is 6%.
6%.
And it's something that is very time specific to this week. Very important statistic for this week.
So 6%, is it related to spring break?
You're so close.
But it's not spring break.
It's not spring break, but it's very close. It's the reason a lot of school districts have spring break this week.
Is this the time change? 6%?
It does deal with the time change.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
very good.
Yeah. So are you supportive of the time change, Chris? I mean, with your scientific background?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I cannot stand daylight savings time.
No,
I call it a public policy abomination, to be honest with you. But no, I do not like the time change.
I think it was maybe 4 years ago, I wrote an op-ed and it appeared in the Houston Chronicle. And we got so many donations just because of that. Like, yeah, if you could shut this down. I mean, people know our record of changing, legislation passing, and they're like, you need to change this. And it's interesting. And even, President Trump, who, I personally don't like, but he said he's going to change this. And then he gets into office. He's like, no, maybe not.
Right. I'm just waiting. I mean, the Senate passed the Sunshine Protection Bill years ago, but they went, in my opinion, the wrong way. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Wow. Very good. All right. Coming up after the quick musical break, we'll be going right into talking about measles here in Texas with Rekha Lakshmanan. She's the Chief Strategy Officer at the Immunization Partnership. We'll be right back here on Growing Up in America. Was that your pick for music, Chris?
It was not my pick.
Yeah, that's Ms. Money. So very good. Rekha Lakshmanan is with us. She's the Chief Strategy Officer at the Immunization Project. Rekha, how are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing all right. How are you both doing?
Very good. Are you in Austin today, Rekha?
No, I'm back in Houston, but I was at the big house at the Capitol yesterday all day, meeting with staff and lawmakers.
Wow. So you probably saw our big press conference yesterday. We had tons of press coverage across the state of Texas on this. You guys, obviously at the Immunization Partnership, you're super worried about this, Rekha.
Yes. Definitely worried about what we're seeing happening, in our state with this big measles outbreak.
Yeah. And what I think is horrible about this, right, is that this is one of these childhood vaccinations that across the world, most kids get this. And across the country, most kids get this. But we're just short in Texas of sort of this community immunity where we can sort of stop measles dead in its tracks. I mean, we're falling below that threshold. Unfortunately, the threshold keeps lowering and lowering in terms of not the threshold, but the number of people getting vaccinated keeps getting lower, Rekha.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a decline in childhood immunization rates across the state, especially after the pandemic or during the pandemic, because a lot of parents weren't bringing their kids into doctor's offices. Understandably, they were scared to bring them in. But we still haven't fully recovered to our pre-pandemic levels. In fact, I was talking to a nurse in West Texas, and he was telling me that they've dropped a couple of percentage points in terms of measles immunization coverage rates. And we know that, for measles, we need at least about 95% of the community to be immunized against measles. And if we fall below that level, then we, run the risk of outbreaks. And that's exactly what we're seeing happen in South Plains right now.
Yeah. Chris?
So there's been a big role of misinformation with all of this, including suggesting that immigrants are driving the measles outbreak. And, we know that, of course, isn't true. So what actually is driving this outbreak, and what role does misinformation play with this?
So that's a great question. So a couple of things. I mean, number one, from a misinformation standpoint, I hate to lay, all the blame on social media, but, social media has definitely helped drive misinformation because information travels so fast. There are, grifters out there that are, profiting off misinformation and disinformation and kind of preying upon parents' fears. At the end of the day, I think, the parents who have questions about vaccines, they just generally have questions about vaccines, and they're looking for good information to make an informed decision. And the best place to go to, number one, is to their doctor. But with social media, with information on these platforms that look credible but are actually not credible, they end up, unfortunately influencing parents to not vaccinate their kids. And then, you have the disinformation campaign about, with measles in Texas, and it's, immigrants that are bringing in measles. Well, we actually looked at the past 13 years. We looked at the state health department's data related to measles cases from 2012 to 2025, so kind of where we are currently. And surprise, surprise, there has not been a single case of measles in the southern border. So if you also look at, kind of cases, imported cases of measles, the past few years, the UK and France, those two countries in particular, have had a high number of cases that have run into the thousands. And we all travel, many of us travel to Europe. Many of us travel to Europe over spring break. And if we see more kids unvaccinated and, they're traveling with parents, this is what could potentially happen. But from the Gaines County outbreak, we don't know exactly where patient zero was and how measles came into the community. But that's an interesting community because that county over the years has historically had high exemption rates, parents opting their children out of school required vaccines. And so it was just unfortunately a matter of time for an outbreak to happen. And it's a clear example of what happens when we see a breakdown in community immunity.
And that's a Mennonite community out there in Gaines County. Is that right?
Yeah, there is a large Mennonite community out there. What is interesting, though, is, and this is, kind of correcting some misinformation.
Yeah.
The Mennonite community, doesn't oppose vaccines. There's nothing in their doctrine or their tenet that prohibits them from getting vaccinated. Again, I think it's that misinformation that, well, measles is a benign disease. It's no big deal. We all had it. Well, I didn't have measles. I got vaccinated. So kind of downplaying the disease and downplaying the complications from the disease. And so parents have just opted, their kids out of not getting them vaccinated.
Yeah. And I want to talk about the complications, but I saw I want to get to the disinformation real quick. I saw a little cartoon and it was a husband saying, "Hey, honey, come over here. I think I found something on the computer that scientists and doctors missed around vaccinations," and it's this whole idea that you could go on the internet and you're going to find something that every scientist and physician missed. And, it's ridiculous because if we had, 1,000 Texas pediatricians in the room, Reka, and we asked them about vaccines for measles, they would all say, 100% would say, do it. And it's like, why do we trust our pediatricians all the time, except for this small group that says, no, with vaccines, I'm not going to trust them, right? It's just such a outrageous thing.
It is. pediatricians, we know that physicians, continue to be sort of the highest level of trust when it comes to, parents and patients. And so sometimes there's a little bit of cherry picking going on, but, at the end of the day, they're your best source.
So I know that with measles, right? For every number of kids that contacts measles, there's going to be hospitalization. There's likely brain inflammation, and then there's a high possibility of death for a subset of these kids. Talk a little bit about this. This is when we see this outbreak in Texas. It's almost exclusively kids that aren't vaccinated.
Yes. I mean, number one, vaccination, it's recommended that, kiddos get 2 doses of measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. And when you get those 2 doses, you have a 97% protection level. And, I think, again, parents, some parents think it's not that big of a deal. My kid has a runny nose, kind of the watery, watery eyes, conjunctivitis.
Yeah.
But then, then the rash happens, and the rash is actually one of the last things that occurs. And you're right that, there are kids, measles is, potentially devastating to small kids, babies, babies who are too young to be vaccinated. They can wind up in the hospital. They can be, they can have dehydration, as you mentioned, brain swelling, pneumonia. The young child, the 6-year-old child who sadly died in Lubbock, it looks like, had pneumonia related, pneumonia related to the measles. Yeah. And so, and it can lead to blindness. And again, I think we're sort of a victim of our own success, right? Yeah. That's the whole point of having vaccines. We don't see these diseases. And so, there are a generation of parents who didn't have to worry about measles. They didn't have to, see iron lungs lined up and polio, cases of polio.
Right.
And so yet we're seeing these happen again. And again, the easiest thing you can do is to vaccinate your kids and not put those children, through a level of suffering, and also for the parents, who are going to be, worried sick that their child is going to fall even sicker and potentially get hospitalized or worse.
Yeah, Chris, you have a good, quick final question?
Sure. So, you need a public policy component to overcome this, right? You need to have support from local and state officials. So what is your message to them? And particularly, what is your message to those officials that are in districts where they're getting pushback from parents?
Well, what we're seeing in the legislature right now are dozens and dozens of bills to either weaken or completely dismantle our immunization program in the state. And, what we're asking lawmakers to do is to frankly do nothing. This is not the time to be looking at vaccine policies and weakening the exemption process or discarding, over a half a century's worth of school requirements. We don't need Texas to be a petri dish right now and everybody and lawmakers experimenting with the laws, because the laws that are on the table for discussion will lead to, more of these outbreaks, lead to more of these dangerous consequences and even worse. So that's our message right now, which is doing nothing is doing a lot. So just leave everything alone.
Yeah, it's interesting, Reka. I know you spend a lot of time up there, as does the team at Children at Risk, and it's interesting how this measles outbreak may have an impact on this, right? I mean, COVID sort of drove things in a different direction, and this may drive things in a particular direction. So we'll see how that goes. Reka Lakshmanan is the Chief Strategy Officer at the Immunization Partnership, one of the great organizations here in Texas. Thank you, Reka, for being on the program. Thank you for what you and all your team are doing around immunizations.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all your support.
All righty. We'll talk to you soon. Hey, coming up on Growing Up in America, Ann Motley's going to be with us. She's the RISE program manager at the Women's Resource of Greater Houston. We're going to be talking about empowerment of high school girls. We'll be right back here on Growing Up in America. All right, you're on Growing Up in America. It's Dr. Bob along with Dr. Chris. So Chris from the Baker Institute, our own Dr. Data is here in the studio. How long have you been doing Growing Up in America now, Chris? Because you've been our Dr. Data for a while now.
It's been almost a year now.
Wow. It's so fantastic to have you two and have you here today in the studio with us. Ann Motley's with us. She is the RISE program manager and of the Women's Resource of Greater Houston. We're here to talk about educational empowerment of high school girls. Ann, how are you doing today?
Hi, good morning. I'm doing well. How are y'all?
Very, very good. Thank you. Chris is doing better than I am, but we're doing pretty well. So, hey, I'm wondering, Ann, tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing in terms of high school girls over at RISE.
Sure. So RISE is an acronym, first of all, for the Road to Independent Success and Empowerment.
Nice.
So as you mentioned, we're a program from the Women's Resource, and the Women's Resource is a Houston-based organization and that helps women find their own independence and success, hopefully through financial literacy. And so the Women's Resource started in the 1990s, and RISE came about in the early 2000s, 2005, and the idea was behind giving our high school girls the tools that they need for a successful future. A lot of our girls are looking at becoming, first-generation college students. They're looking at, graduating from high school in a different way than maybe their parents did or other family members they've had examples in. And so giving them the tools that they need to be successful, whatever success looks like for them. And we talk about an array of things, mostly financial literacy, but we also touch on healthy relationships. We talk on, we speak to socialization in high schools. I heard your previous speaker talking about social media and the impact of social media. So we kind of touch on everything and really try to empower our girls to live their best lives.
So education itself has, changed quite a bit in the past 5 years, particularly with technology, so on and so forth. So what are some of the specific strategies that you've implemented to support continuous learning and development?
Sure. So we work with what we call year 1 to year 4. And so it's freshman to senior year. So our program starts with the freshman girls, and we kind of build up different curriculum pieces through the years as they go through college. And so, and the thought behind, or as they go through high school and prepare for college. So, and the thought behind that with technology, and believe me, I asked my girls the other day, they had their phones out, and I said, is this just something that's accepted now in school, that you have your phones out in class, they all have tablets? So this all looks a lot different, I think, year to year as technology has developed. And our challenge is to still give them those financial tools that they can use and tell them what their resources are and how to use technology effectively, and try to find the best resources for them that are useful, but also that are engaging for them. I think that's always the challenge for us, is how can we make our curriculum more engaging? Part of our curriculum was to write a hard copy check, paper checks, and half of them are like, what's a checkbook?
Yeah.
It's bad times, those types of challenges with us of thinking outside the box of, okay, what are these girls going to encounter now and in the future as they're opening checking accounts, as we're teaching them about credit cards and taking on loans and all the different things that come along with that. But all of it's done online now for the most part. And so we're really having to structure our curriculum differently year to year based on what's available to them.
What, and I think about myself growing up, and, I grew up in a very low income household. And so I didn't have any financial literacy, I would say, as I went into college. And I remember asking a lot of questions and getting half answers sometimes. And, you ask your peers, they know less than they should. And I'm wondering, as you work with these young women, what are some of the challenges that people who've been out of college for a year or two, and they're hearing the challenges that you're facing with these girls? What are some of the challenges that you're facing that might be a little bit different than other people have sort of had as they've sort of met some of these obstacles?
Sure. Well, I think we always say knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these girls, and a lot of them, they're in great schools, and they have great teachers who are working in the same efforts that we're working towards of preparing these girls for the next step in life, whatever that is. And but a lot of them have not been in surroundings that they understand a lot of these things that are going to come next. And so when we talk about financial literacy, that's one reason why we do start with the very basics of what is this? What is a checking account? What is a debit card? What's the difference between a debit card and a credit card? All of these things that to some of us might be common knowledge, it's not. And that's one thing in my role that I have learned. I haven't been with women's resource for very long. I within my first year, and so I've been in that nonprofit industry forever. And but one thing I've learned through this type of work is not to assume that someone has the tools just because they have, the access to technology. They might not know where to look. And so, I think just kind of building those blocks, as you were saying, you didn't know who to ask. And I think that's a lot of times with our girls, they don't know who to ask. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know where to find the information that would be most helpful to them. So the more information that we can give them, we always phrase it as, we're giving you the tools to put in your own toolbox. However you use the tools is up to you. We're not going to tell you how to use them. We're not going to tell you what to do. But here are all the tools that we think are most helpful to you. You've got your toolbox. How are you going to use it moving forward? And so hopefully we're giving them enough knowledge to move forward to where, they can not only learn for themselves, but maybe help their family members out as well, and help their other peers out who might not, have access to RISE.
Yeah, Chris?
Another thing that we're seeing a lot of shifts is with the job market, right? The job market, of course, is radically changing, and how you apply, how you have to put your materials together. Even AI, people are using AI to put their cover letters together and such. So how does the program empower women, help women navigate and succeed in the current job market? And why is this particularly critical right now?
Well, I think one thing we talk about, we do career exploration in our junior and seniors class especially. We'll sometimes do career visits. We do career panels as well. And one thing that I noticed when I first started was that our career panels, but based on our volunteer base, we have a lot of people in the banking industry and accounting industry volunteering for us and supporting our cause. And one thing I really wanted to do that we've been somewhat successful in already is just diversifying our career panels, pulling in people from all the different industries, especially that Houston offers, because a lot of these girls, they want to be Houston-based. This is where family is. This is what they know. And even if they go off to school, they might be coming back to Houston. So trying to show them the different industries that are out there to them and what it looks like, and each individual's path to being in the career they're in. And that way they learn a little bit more about, okay, so this is what I would need to do to break into this career. This is kind of the path that I would need to be on. What am I doing now in high school that can prepare me for this path? And because it is ever changing in Houston, luckily we live in such a large city with so many different industries that I really get to kind of pluck from numerous, networks that are my own networks and other networks from friend to friend, and to pull in people who are hopefully going to show our girls what all is available to them. And we work on resumes. Obviously, we talk about AI. That's available to them, but that's tricky. As someone who, I'm 41 years old, and so for someone who didn't have access to those types of things, I'm having to teach myself as well. And so it is very interesting as they are having, they're on their phones Googling stuff and using, all this stuff where we'll pre-write things for them. And I'm like, well, but is that what you want to say, or is that what Google is telling you to say?
Yeah.
So it is interesting. It's ever changing, but I think from a resume perspective, cover letter perspective, really telling their stories and teaching them how to really identify what their skills are and what they're really interested in is our focus.
Ann Motley is the RISE program manager at the Women's Resource of Greater Houston. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thanks so much for being on Growing Up in America this morning.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
All right. We'll have to have you back. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Coming up on the program, we're going to do data of the day, 6%. So you ready, Chris?
I am ready.
Very good. We'll be right back after this musical break here on Growing Up in America. All right, Chris, 6%, and I know it's related around the time change. I'm going to think, I'm thinking maybe it's related to mental health, but 6% seems low. I mean, there's a lot of data around the time change, right?
There is a lot of data. So there's not a lot of, unfortunately, optimistic data when it comes to the time change. And, we're feeling some of it this week, right, in terms of how tired we are.
Yeah.
So, no, the 6%, that is the increase in the rate of fatal car crashes.
Holy cow.
Right after the time change, the week after.
So people are just a little groggy. They're just not used to it.
Right. They're exhausted. And when you're driving in the morning, it's dark outside. You shift the time and you don't have sunlight. And indeed, if we were to go to like a year-round, which is what one of the proposals are, we would actually have the sun coming up after 8 a.m. in certain locations. So that would make this worse. But yes, there's really not a lot out there.
Yeah, what is the big negative thing? I mean, why is it that whenever you ask anyone around the time change, pretty much everyone says, yeah, hate it. We don't like it. When we look at the data around children, kids do poorly in school when there's the time change. Either way, and I'm wondering, why does it stick around? I mean, it was started like around World War I, right? Right after World War I.
Right. Yeah. So it started off in Germany.
Yeah.
And then
that should be enough right there to
right.
To get
yeah.
rid of it.
It started off in Germany. It went away. It came back during World War II. People didn't like it. Then it came back again in the 1960s. And, that law allowed states to opt out of it. And so far, we only have 2 states that opt out, Hawaii and Arizona. But there's also not a consensus about which direction people want to go, if they want to stay on daylight savings time or if they want to go to standard time. You have a lot of people have different opinions about whether or not they want that extra light in the evening or if they want, more light in the morning. But standard time is more in line with our circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
We're built to rise and go to bed with the sun. So
yeah. So there's no really good reason to keep it. I mean,
no.
Do farmers like it better?
No, farmers don't like it because it messes up with their feeding schedules and with their it's not good any way around.
So it's,
really. So why we haven't done something with this yet? Again, it's really because you can't really get a consensus about whether or not to stick with one or the other. There's even been some to say, well, let's shift it by half an hour and stick with that as a compromise.
And there are cities around the world that are for a while, Indiana was doing like half an hour. I don't know if they're still doing it. And I know that in Mumbai, India, they're at it the half hour.
Yeah, well, Indiana's a little interesting because I did my PhD at Purdue in Indiana, and that was a big topic in terms of the elections, not only with daylight savings time, but what time zone they were going to be in. And some of the northern counties still go on central. They don't want to comply with that. But with all that being said, we have to do something about this.
Yeah.
The time change is ridiculous. It messes with our mental health and during both switches.
The problem is that there's no big lobbying group that's just saying, this is what we're going to tackle. It's just one of those things that's sort of like a nuisance. And I mean, an evidence-based big nuisance.
Right.
But there's just, what we need to do is get a big coalition of people together and just say, this is important. Except when I think about the lives of children, it just doesn't.
It doesn't really come up very much. No, but it doesn't even meet its basic goal of reducing energy. It does nothing.
Yeah.
So time to get rid of it, if you ask me. But we'll see if it ever happens.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Data. Thanks for being here. Hey, coming up after the quick musical break, Rebecca George. She's here with Hip Speak. Hip Speak with RG. We'll be right back here on Growing Up in America. Let's come together over RG, Rebecca George. She's our media fellow at Children at Risk, and she's a student at Southwestern University out in Georgetown, Texas. Rebecca, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Very good. I'm trying to figure out, should we call you Rebecca G, Becky G, RG? Of all those nicknames, do you have a favorite, or we'll just want to stick with Rebecca George?
I would say usually when I have a nickname, people don't say the G. So if we want to make something tailored to the radio show with the G, I would be happy to have it.
Okay. There you go. All right. I'll keep thinking about it, but you need to let me know too. Okay. Hip Speak, RG. What are we thinking in regards to Hip Speak? What's your first? Because now we have Dr. Data in the house, now, I'm a big nerd, and so it's hard for me to be hip. But Dr. Data is an even bigger nerd, so it's harder even for him to be hipper.
I would agree with this 100%. Yeah.
So, but we are going to do our darndest. Sometimes nerds come through, as you know, RG, right? So,
yes, very true. As a fellow nerd, I definitely agree.
All right. So what's our first hip word?
So the first word I have for you is cap. Like if something is cap.
Yeah. So cap. So I think I know this. It's almost like, I think it's like BS, or it's like not true if it's cap, is my guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's that same thing, like not good or not reasonable or something along those lines.
What is it, Rebecca?
It means, it's basically just something that's not true. So like a lie.
Yeah.
It's like if you're saying, like someone says something to you and you're like, that's cap, you're lying to me.
Yeah. Or no cap. I'm not lying. No cap.
No cap. That's
right.
very
So,
true. Yeah.
So I think Rebecca George is top notch. No cap. Right.
Oh, thank you.
There you go. All right. Second word.
So our second word is when someone is serving, or if something is a serve.
A serve. You got that, Chris?
I don't have that one.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
So I'm thinking if someone's serving, it's like it's delightful. If someone is serving, it's it's something really good. They're like on I was going to say on fleek. Someone who is like on topic. They're doing well when they're serving. Is that right?
It's actually very similar to on fleek in a way. It means usually if you say someone's like outfit is serving. So like maybe someone who's really well dressed.
Oh, very good.
Really what that means.
Yeah. So in our studios, then Bree is serving, right? Because she's got it going on with her dress. Yeah.
I would say if she's wearing something really good, then she's definitely serving.
All right. So, okay. And do you have a third word for us today?
Yes. Our last word for you is flex, like to flex.
Yeah. So this is my middle name is Flex, right? So flexing is, do you know this one?
Well,
Chris?
I would expect just, that this is to show off or something, or to like, am I completely?
Yeah. No, I think that's it. Like a little bit of boasting, right?
Yeah.
So I happen to have already traveled this year to 4 countries. That's a little bit of a flex, wouldn't you say, RG?
Definitely that is a flex, because you guys are absolutely correct. It's something you're bragging about or trying to show off. That's exactly what a flex is. Y'all got it on point.
So what's really interesting about this is that for all those hipsters out there that learn from this little thing, flex is probably one of the most common ones, right? You're seeing a lot more than this, a lot more of this where people say, well, that's a little bit of a flex, like a little bit of a brag, right? So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Or they'll say something like weird flex, but okay.
Yeah.
If it's a little bit strange, yes.
Exactly.
Weird flex, but okay. Very good. So, Becky G, thank you so very much for the Hip Speak this morning. And we'll see you next week here on Growing Up in America, Rebecca.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. Take care. Hip Speak with RG. So I like that. I think it has I like my own thing that I came up, just a little bit of a flex. I think it's,
No, I think it's excellent. No, nicknames. This show has a great system for creating nicknames. I'll say that.
Very good. Hey, coming up after the break, we have Darlene Whitaker with us. She's the community liaison for the Early Learning Quality Network over at the Harris County Public Library. And we'll be right back here on Growing Up in America.
A sign to let me know you're here. All of these lines are being crossed over the atmosphere. I need to know that things are gonna look up, 'cause I feel us drowning in a sea spilled from a cup.
All right, you're back on Growing Up in America. Always good to hear from Becky G, huh?
It is.
Yeah, very good. Learning a little bit as we go. Darlene Whitaker is with us. She's the community liaison for the Early Learning Quality Network at the Harris County Public Library. Darlene, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, I am doing good. How about yourself?
Doing pretty well. So,
Good.
for those that are maybe new listeners, talk about the Harris County Public Library's role in the Early Learning Quality Network, this idea around getting childcare to be top-notch in our county.
Sure, no problem. Now I'm going to say a bit of some acronyms, so
Okay.
Please feel free to let me know if I need to explain what it is.
I
But
will.
Okay, great. The Department of Harris County DEEO is piloting a new community-driven network approach to supporting quality improvement in early learning settings, primarily focused on child care settings, and Harris County Public Library is supporting that work in Precinct 1 and 3.
And does that mean that you guys are doing childcare within the public libraries in Precinct 1 and 3?
So what we're doing is we are gathering information from the community to have these initiatives to improve the quality in the childcare within various precincts.
Mm-hmm. And so are kids obviously kids are in the library all the time, but I guess I'm
Right.
trying to make this connection with early education.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's so as far as early education, it is from ages 0 to 8, and it's within the community. So we're working with our stakeholders, our business owner, child care centers, schools, and different resources like that.
Yeah, very good.
So what does that process look like in gathering that information and working with stakeholders? What have you really done to create those bridges so that you could get really good information about what needs to be done?
So we began administering an initial survey to gauge feedback on the state of quality childcare in each precinct. And that feedback helped us to form an advisory committee. And so the advisory committee was formed through feedback sessions where we are able to get that audience by doing events and having them to attend and see who is interested in being a part of this initiative.
And what are the big challenges you guys are facing, Darlene, when it comes to early learning quality in the public libraries?
I would say the challenges that we have faced is reaching our home-based providers and building trust within that particular network. And so we are working hard to kind of overcome that particular challenge at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So looking at the implementation of this, what are some of the things that you hope that come out of this? And what are some of the things that you're thinking will be driven as you collect this information?
As far as what we hope to come out of this, we're hoping to improve the quality of childcare, of course.
Yeah.
Each precinct, we have our monthly events that we encourage the community to come out to and give us feedback on initiatives and on gaps in resources within the early childcare so that we can, of course, improve the learning quality of each initiative that we have.
What is, I know that we have all these childcare deserts, right, all over Harris County.
Yes.
What can the role of the public library be in sort of helping alleviate those deserts or helping some of the childcare centers that are there be better childcare centers? What is it that the public library can do, Darlene, to help with this?
So far, we have about 6 different approved initiatives. And so Harris County is, I guess their DEEO, the Department of Equity and Education Opportunity. We have this initiative where, we are providing training and professional development, facility, safety, and security resources, technology within the households, technology within child care centers, and learning materials. And so that's what we have. And also we have curriculum. I'm so sorry. But we have curriculum so that we can provide those resources for the community. And so, again, Harris County Public Library is kind of the driving force behind this initiative.
Yeah, very good. Darlene, I love having people from the public library on because I always get to ask them about their favorite childhood book or favorite book. And so I want to know from you, Darlene, growing up as a kid, first off, where did you grow up? Where were you a kid? Were you in Houston?
I was. So I grew up in North Houston, and I went to all Spring ISD schools.
Oh, wow.
And so,
very good. What high school did you graduate from, Darlene?
I graduated from Spring High School.
Spring High School. Very good. I love the superintendent up in Spring, Lupita Hinojosa. She's such a great superintendent. But now the question of the hour, Darlene, as a young kid, what was your favorite children's book?
My favorite children's book was Willie the Wimp.
Willie the Wimp. I don't know that one. So what was that about?
So Willie the Wimp, basically he was picked on and a lot as a younger kid, and then he grew up and became this big, strong gorilla, and he kind of abused his powers only to be learn his lesson and to be reminded to be humble. And so that was my favorite book.
Wow, very good. It's sort of like the Charles Atlas story. Do you know Charles Atlas, Chris?
So I don't think I do.
Yeah, so that was like what I would see in the back of comic books reading as a kid was always like how you can go from wimp to strong man, Charles Atlas story. So anyway.
Yes.
Very good. Darlene Whitaker, she's the community liaison at the Harris County Public Library. Thank you, Darlene, for what you guys are doing at the library. I love the library. I could go on and on about the time I've spent in public libraries. And so thank you so much. And we'll catch you next time here on Growing Up in America.
Sounds great. Be sure to get your library cards.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go. Take care. Hey, coming up after the break, we're going to be talking with Kate Murphy. She's in Austin. She's the director of Child Protection Policy for Texans Care for Children. We'll be right back here on Growing Up in America.
Dime cómo hacemos. Si tú me deseas, yo a ti también. Hace rato te quiero comer. Di qué vas a hacer. Así que ponme un dembow que se no respeta.
Un poco en español, Chris.
Unfortunately, I know very little Spanish. I'm trying to learn it from my wife, but my 3-year-old son knows more Spanish than I do.
Yeah, that's a Colombiana. So Kate Murphy's with us. Kate is the director of Child Protection Policy at Texans Care for Children. Kate, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Very good. How's the weather in Austin, Kate, right now?
It's warming up and a little bit cloudy. It's been kind of cool the last few days, but I think it's supposed to be hot later today. But I'm watching some clouds roll by the window right now.
Yeah, I understand there's supposed to be some bad weather across central Texas, so I didn't know if that was Austin or not. But, this is not a weather show. This is a public policy and children's show. I want to ask you, you're spending a lot of time, you're up there, a lot of the Children at Risk team, the Texans Care for Children team, the Tex Protects, and these are the child advocacy groups that spend a lot of time in Austin. Talk a little bit about the mood up there around children, child welfare. Is it mostly defense that you're finding yourself playing, Kate?
Not on child protection issues this session, which is nice. It's a strange vibe at the Capitol. There are definitely a lot of people who are playing defense on a number of issues right now. I think especially on our healthcare team. But there have been a few really big child protection sessions over the last couple of years, and most of the bills that have been filed related to foster care, at least, are pretty good bills. So it's nice to have good things to work on and things that we can try to move forward that we're excited about.
One of the things that, people have me come speak about sort of the state of children, and I'll talk about sort of the failed foster care system that we have in the state of Texas. Do you have a feeling like things are about to get better with foster care, or at least a little bit better, Kate?
That's always the hope, but actually a lot of our priorities related to child protection are focusing specifically on how we can keep kids out of foster care, because even under the best of circumstances, it's really hard to get things right within the foster care system.
Yeah.
These kids have been through so much. The system is responding to crises. And so the more that we can do to keep kids out of care, the better, in large part because the system is struggling. So we really want a system that is the right sized with the right kids, and making sure that they can give them the time and attention and care that they need. And one of the best ways to do that is by supporting families in ways that don't rely on the foster care system.
Right. So thinking about the challenges in the foster care system and the CPS system as a whole, so how might improving legal representation actually help address some of these issues?
Yeah, legal representation is definitely one of our top priorities for this session. Last session, 2 years ago, there was a bill that passed that created an Office of Family Protection Services within the Texas Indigent Defense Commission. Right now, counties are on the hook for paying for attorneys in CPS cases, and counties have limited funding. So what we're seeing is a lot of families are really only doing what's absolutely required of them. So that means that certain groups are either not getting representation early enough or they're losing representation at a certain point. So lawyers can really help families understand what's happening to them. They can help with a number of other legal issues that come up that might drive kids into foster care, or might come up while kids are in the foster care system, related to health care, related to securing housing, any number of things. And I think one of the most exciting things that is available right now is that the Indigent Defense Commission is authorized to start funding attorneys for families at the beginning of a CPS investigation. You know, people might be surprised to learn that unlike in criminal cases where you can be appointed an attorney as soon as you're arrested and while you're being investigated, in CPS cases, you don't actually get appointed an attorney until your child is removed from your home and taken away from you. So that leaves parents kind of on their own and, you know, often trying to navigate very complicated issues without a whole lot of help. So one of the very exciting things that this funding can do is support families early on in the process. There was a pilot in Central Texas in Waco that appointed counsel for families at that point. As soon as an investigation started, as soon as CPS was at the door of a parent. And in that pilot, 98% of the families avoided having their kids taken away, which is incredible, right? So that's something we're very excited about. Another population that often doesn't have counsel throughout the life of the CPS case are youth. So young people in foster care only are guaranteed a lawyer when they're in temporary foster care while the case is active before they've decided whether to terminate their parents' rights or not. But if kids stay in foster care after their parents' rights are terminated, then they might lose access to counsel. So if things are coming up and kids need a voice in court, they may or may not have one. So it can really support youth on the back end of the system as well if that program gets funded.
Kate, for people that are listening to the program today and they don't know much about child protection policy, and maybe they know that we're talking about kids that are coming from broken homes and broken systems. If you were to give a letter grade to Texas in terms of how we're doing in taking care of those kids, how do we do as a state overall?
Well, that's such a hard question to answer because every case is so individual. And truthfully, when you're looking at the foster care system in Texas, while there are many challenges, there are a lot of things that the Department of Family and Protective Services actually does very well. A lot of the problems come up because of other systems that they rely on that are less well-resourced or have wait lists for services, and we can't get kids connected to the help that they need. So I don't know. I think it's hard to put an exact grade on it, given the climate that they're working within and trying to navigate. I would say maybe if I had to assign it a grade, I'd give it a B-.
Wow. So you're like a little generous, right? I mean, one of the things that I'll often say around some of this stuff is, I'll give it a bad grade, but then I'll say, but Texas is a very optimistic place. And so you led with the optimism, right? The B-, right? Is because we do probably more than when I talk to my colleagues around the country, we seem to have this feeling like, well, we could fix this, right? Even though the data doesn't always back it up. But I think there's a lot to be said about that optimism, right? I think,
yeah. Well, it's challenging, right? I think because it depends a lot on where you live.
Yeah.
It depends a lot on who your caseworkers are. Are there Fs out there? Sure. But I would say overall, there's a lot of good that's happening in the foster care system that people don't realize or aren't aware of. And a lot of the biggest challenges that the foster care system is facing really relate to gaps in our healthcare services, or especially our mental health services.
Yeah, very good. Okay, I'm going to move now to the speed round questions, the fun questions that we always give our final guest here on Growing Up in America. And I'm going to ask you the same question that we asked of Darlene from the public library earlier. Your favorite children's book as you were growing up, or even your favorite children's book now. What would you say, Kate?
My favorite children's book growing up was called Owl Moon.
Owl Moon. Man, do you know that one, Chris?
I don't know that one.
Yeah, very good. Chris, what was your favorite?
So it was the Jingle Bugs book, because at the very end, it had the Christmas tree and it lit up. I still have my old book, and I gave it to my son, actually, but he started breaking it a little bit, so now we kind of put it back as a memento.
What's your fun question for Kate?
So I'd like to ask, what streaming series have you binge watched recently?
Oh, yeah. What are you binge watching, Kate?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, right now, I don't know if I'm not binging it because it's periodic, but the two shows that I'm on the edge of my seat for every week as soon as a new episode drops are Severance and Yellow Jackets.
Oh, wow.
Very
Two
nice.
good ones. They're both pretty popular. Severance has sort of like a quirky group following it, I've noticed, right? So people like Severance a lot. And what was your favorite meal as a kid that if your family was having this meal, you'd get ecstatic? What was it when you were a kid?
100% Thanksgiving dinner, which is only once a year, but it was something I always looked forward to, and I was so excited about it that I would make little place cards for everyone where I would draw a turkey and write their name and then give them a handwritten thank you. I started doing that when I was 4 or 5, well, probably 6 years old. I don't know, however old I was when I learned how to write and draw.
Wow. A little like Thanksgiving. You were giving thanks. Wow. Very nice little thing. I always find it funny about Thanksgiving because I also love Thanksgiving, but I feel like these days I spend, my wife and we spend 5-6 hours, preparing the meal, and then it's finished in about 15 minutes, so it's...
That's about right. That means you did it correctly because it was that good.
Oh, very good. You have one final question?
Yeah, so what Oscar-nominated movie from this year do you think everybody should watch?
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm going to go with Wicked, which feels basic, but I absolutely love that musical, and the movie was beautifully done, so I loved it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite of the Oscar movies, Chris?
I'm going to have to say Wicked as well.
You liked Wicked?
Yes.
I loved Wicked. I went with some buddies, and we all left the theater crying, right? We loved it so much. So and even when I still hear Defying Gravity, I start crying.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge musical person. I may or may not belt out Les Mis when I'm driving home from work, but that's another story, isn't it?
I don't want to hear about it. So... Kate Murphy is out at the great organization Texans Care for Children out in Austin. She's the director of child protection policy. Kate, thank you so much for all you and your team are doing to help children in our state, and keep up the great work. And thanks for being on Growing Up in America.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All righty. Take care. That's our show. Chris Kalesa has been with us, Dr. Data, and I'm Bob Sanborn from Children at Risk. We thank you for being here. We'll see you next time here on KPFT and Growing Up in America.
I hopped up the plane at LAX with a dream, my cardigan. Welcome to the land of fame excess. Am I gonna fit in? Jumped in the cab, here I am for the first time. Look to my right and I see the Hollywood sign.